Okay, hello everyone. Gonna take this a little bit. This is going a little too loosey-goosey. There we go. There we go. Hello everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic Monday. I recently got a new comic book in the mail. It's the Sherlock Holmes comic book from Mike Baron, and I can't wait to read that after the stream. But for now, let's get on with the show. So, it's been a while since I selected the artist that we're going to be covering. So today, I decided that I wanted to cover Giraud, or as many of you will probably know him better as Moebius. He is a French artist, and he's worked on quite a few series over here in the States and elsewhere. But before we get into his Wikipedia page, let's check out our friends over at Comics Alliance to watch their short little video on him.
You might think you know Moebius, but here are 12 facts you might not have known about France's greatest comics artist. Jean Giraud, better known by his pen name Moebius, was born on May 8, 1938, in the suburbs of Paris, France. He is acknowledged as one of
It's weird to think that Paris has suburbs. I'm used to thinking of Paris as a city, not as suburbs.
the best and most influential European comics artists of all time. Giraud adopted the pen name Moebius as a humorous reference to August Ferdinand Moebius, the German mathematician who devised the Moebius strip. Giraud would also abbreviate his name to Gir for his comic Blueberry and some of his paintings. His use of pen names stemmed from negative feelings about his parents' divorce. Giraud
I feel that.
only briefly attended art school, where his instructors frowned on his obsession with producing cowboy comics, based on his love of Western movies. He left art school without graduating to visit his mother, who had remarried in Mexico. The desert landscapes only cemented Giraud's love of the Western frontier. By age 18, Giraud was drawing his own Western strip, Frank and Jeremy, for the magazine Far West, followed by various others, including King of the Buffalo and Fort Navajo. His most famous Western comic, however, was Blueberry, created with writer Jean-Michel Charlier. The two would produce 29 Blueberry graphic albums, with Giraud writing the last 5 himself after Charlier's death.
I really want to read Blueberry, but the thing is, Blueberry graphic novels are super expensive. And that's because they have not reprinted the damn things in years. Yeah. Rare Blueberry 1, 2, and 3 for the low price of $139.99. Yeah, I do really want to read it, but it's too much money. So I think I'm just gonna pirate it. Now, if the publisher would be nice enough to finally reprint the damn thing, I will happily pay money for it. But for now, they do not get my money.
Due to a dispute over royalties, Giraud would stop work on Blueberry in 1974 and would not return to it for 15 years. It was at this time that he revived the Moebius pen name he had used as a young man to create sci-fi and fantasy comics as a founding creator of the magazine Metal Hurlant, which would be published in the US as Heavy Metal. Moebius's most famous work from this period includes the wordless fantasy series Arzak, the whimsical science fiction series The Airtight Garage, and epic space opera The Incal, which was written by film director Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Jodorowsky is another very kooky guy in comic books.
However, Moebius is probably best known to most American comics fans for his work on the 2-issue miniseries Silver Surfer Parable, which was written by Stan Lee and published by Marvel's Epic imprint in 1988. Besides his work in comics, Moebius also contributed storyboards and concept art for a ton of movies, including Alien, Tron, The Fifth Element, Willow, and Space Jam. That's right, fellow millennials, Space Jam. He also wrote the story for the Japanese animated adaptation of Winsor McKay's Little Nemo in Slumberland. Even though Moebius worked on The Fifth Element as a production designer, after the release of the film, Moebius and Jodorowsky sued director Luc Besson for plagiarizing the Incal. The case was ultimately...
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that. I need to look into that case detail because that seems very odd to work on The Fifth Element as like one of the producers, or art producer, I should say, but sue him for plagiarizing the Incal. But maybe they didn't know it was going to be very similar to the Incal until afterwards.
dismissed as the court found only small parts were copied, and because Moebius had worked on the film. Over the course of his career, Moebius racked up a number of industry awards, including 2 Eisner Awards, 3 Harvey Awards, an Inkpot Award, a World Fantasy Award, and a ton of European awards. He has also been inducted into the Jack Kirby Hall of Fame, the Will Eisner Hall of Fame, and the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. Giraud passed away on March 10, 2012 at the age of 73, following a long struggle with cancer. France's cultural minister at the time remarked that upon Giraud's death, France had lost 2 great artists, meaning his work as both Giraud and as Moebius. Some of the notable artists who list Giraud as an influence include filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki, who was longtime friends with Giraud, cyberpunk...
And that says something. I mean, Hayao Miyazaki is kind of a grump in and of himself, but it's nice that he has... It's nice to hear when he has legit friends with other artists and directors.
Author William Gibson, Blade Runner director Ridley Scott, and Italian director Federico Fellini, who said Moebius was as great an artist as Picasso and Matisse. That's it for this episode of You Think You Know Comics. Don't forget to like this video.
Alright, so that's a basic overview. And let's get into the details over in the Wikipedia page. Don't worry, I'm linking everything down below. Alright, so Jean-Henri Gaston Giraud. I'm trying to pronounce it as French as I can because I know that in France, in the French language, you have 15 letters in a word, you pronounce 10 of them. Alright, born May 8th, 1938, died March 10th, 2012. That is the year before I graduated high school. Alright, was a French artist, cartoonist, and writer who worked in the Franco-Belgian bande dessinée tradition. What the heck is that? Abbreviated, also referred to the Franco-Belgian. Oh, comics usually in French and created for readership in... Okay. Alright, so just French and Belgian comics. So that's what they're called. Alright. Giraud garnered worldwide acclaim, predominantly under the pseudonym Moebius, for his fantasy science fiction work, and to a lesser extent as Giraud, which he used for the Blueberry series, and his other Western-themed work. Esteemed by Federico Fellini, Stan Lee, and Hayao Miyazaki, among others, he has been described as the most influential bande dessinée artist after Herg. Oh, he did The Adventures of Tintin. Oh, okay. Okay, so Jose, I'm guessing that's... no, that's not what I wanted to do. Alright, moving on before I click on any other things. Alright, for most of his body of work as Giraud concerns the Blueberry series created with writer Jean-Marcel Scherer, featuring one of the first anti-heroes in Western comics, and which is particularly valued in continental Europe. As Moebius, he achieved worldwide renown, in this case in the English-speaking nations and Japan, renown, as well, there where his work as Giraud had not done well, by creating a wide range of science fiction and fantasy comics in a highly imaginative, surrealist, and almost abstract style. These works include Arak and the airtight garage of Jerry Cornelius. He also collaborated with avant-garde filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky for an unproduced adaptation of Dune. Oh yeah, I didn't know he was also working on Dune. And the comic book series The Inkle. Moebius has also contributed storyboards and concept designs to several science fiction and fantasy films, such as Alien, Tron, The Fifth Element, and The Abyss. Blueberry was adapted on screen? I didn't know that. In 2004 by French director Jean Coren. I didn't know that. What? Okay, maybe I'll check that out one of these days. It looks like it's in English, so that's good. Right, but before we check out the rest of his life, let's look at some of his art. But yeah, this is the Moebius style. Very dreamlike, very vivid in color. And there's a lot of detail too in some of the shading, the cracks, and just all around really beautiful looking art pieces. Yeah, I can definitely see a lot of the inspiration for some Studio Ghibli films. Like, I'm getting Ponyo vibes from this one for some reason. But yeah. Let's see if we can find some of the Blueberry artwork. I'm sure it won't be around here somewhere. Ooh! Yep, I think that's the bird bat thing from the heavy metal movie that he's riding on. I also just really love the way Moebius does colors. It's pastel, kind of, but also it's like a wider range of pastel, so it's not like, pink and purples and like uber pretty, but it is beautiful. Ah, there we go. There it is. You can definitely see the difference between the art he did with Blueberry, with some of his earlier art, and his later art when he was doing fantasy. Star Watcher? That's not what I meant. Huh. Very pretty. I sometimes get jealous of artists, how they're able to make such beautiful art pieces. And then I remember that I could make those art pieces too if I put my mind to it. But I'm busy with a whole bunch of other stuff. Here's another really beautiful one. I love how he did the headpiece there. Anyway, let me blow my nose real quick. It's starting to run a little. It has been raining so much over here that the constant change in the weather is affecting my nose. Alright. Jean Giraud was born in Nancy-Marne, Val-de-Marne. I cannot pronounce French. In the suburbs of Paris, as the only child to Raymond Giraud, an insurance agent, and Pauline Vicomte, who had worked at the agency. When he was 3 years old, his parents divorced, and he was subsequently raised by mainly his grandparents, who were living in the neighboring municipality. Much later, when he was a acclaimed artist, Giraud returned to live in the municipality in the mid-70s, but was unable to buy his grandparents' erstwhile house. The rupture between mother and father created a lasting trauma that he explained lay at the heart of his choice to separate pen names. A somewhat sickly and introverted child at first, Giraud found solace after World War II in a small theater located on a corner in the streets where his mother lived, which concurrently provided an escape from the dreary atmosphere in post-war Reconstruction era France. Playing abundant of American B-movie westerns. Oh, that's where the influence is. He grew up on westerns, so he decided to make his own western. Giraud, frequenting the theater there as often as he was able to, developed a passion for the genre, as did many other European boys his age in those times. Alright, around ages 9 and 10, Giraud started to draw Western comics while enrolled by his single mother as a stopgap measure. Okay. At age 16, he began his only technical training at, cannot pronounce that, where he started producing Western comics, though these did not sit well with his conventional teachers. At the college, he befriended other future comic artists, Giraud Mézeray and Pat Mallet. Alright, let's see what he did. Introduced by drawing his elder brother. Doesn't say right there. Does not exist. Oh, so now we're not going to figure out who that guy is. Alright. With Mézeray in particular, in no small part due to their shared passion for science fiction, westerns, and the Far West, Giraud developed a close lifelong friendship, calling him life's continuing adventure in later life. In 1956, left art school without graduating to visit his mother, who married a Mexican in Mexico, and stayed there for 9 months. Oh, 9 months, and that was what really got him going. Alright. The experience of the Mexican desert, in particular its endless blue skies and unending plain flats, now seeing and experiencing for himself the vistas that had enthralled him so much when watching the westerns on the silver screen, only a few years earlier, left an everlasting something which literally cracked open my soul. I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. Enduring impression on him. Easily recognizable in almost all of his later seminal works. Alright, so he was slated for military service in, firstly, the French occupation zone of Germany, and subsequently Algeria, in the thralls of the vicious Algerian War at the time. Fortunately for him, however, he managed to escape frontline duty as he, being the only serviceman available at the time with a graphics background, served out his military obligations, being set to work as illustrator on the army magazine 5 to 5 Forces Françaises. Besides being assigned to logistic duties, Algeria was Giraud's second acquaintance with other, more exotic cultures, and like he did in Mexico, he soaked in the experience, which made another inevitable impression on the young man born as a suburban city boy. Alright, so his career, he was drawing his own humorous, Morse-inspired Western comic 2-page, Frank and Jeremy. As freelance, magazine editor, thought Giraud was gifted. Alright. Tenured at publisher Phalaris from 56 to 58 after his first sales, Giraud did so, but concurrently continued to steadfastly create realistically drawn Western comics. Alright. Illustrated for magazine editorials in their magazine Fipon et Messe, and all of those guys. All of them of a strong, edifying nature aimed at France's adolescent youth, up to a point that his realistic drawn comics had become his mainstay. Alright, among his realistic westerns was a comic called King of the Buffalo, and A Giant Among Herons. Actually, several of his Western comics, including King of the Buffalo, featured the same protagonist, Art Hallwell, and these can be considered as Giraud's de facto first realistic Western series, as he himself didn't in effect, since he, save the first one, endowed these stories with subtitles Un adventure de Art Hallwell for Flores. Giraud also illustrated his first 3 books. Already in this period, his style was heavily influenced by his later mentor, Belgian comic artist Joseph Gigi Gian. These French names! Who at the time was the major source of inspiration for an entire generation of young aspiring French comic artists, including Giraud's friend Marie, interested in doing realistically drawn comics. Alright, Belgian. Best known for being a seminal artist on the Spirou de Fantastico strip. One of the first major Western strips, Jerry Spring. Alright. Where did I go? Alright. How major Gigi influence was on these young artists was amply demonstrated by the Fleurs publication these youngsters submitted their work to, as their work strongly resembled each other. For example, 2 of the books Giraud illustrated for Flores were co-illustrated with Guy Monumals. I'm gonna go Guy M. I give up trying to pronounce these French names. Another name for some future renown in the Franco-Belgian comic art world. And Giraud's work can only be identified because he signed his work, whereas M did not sign his. While not ample, Giraud's earnings at Fleurs were just enough to allow him, disenchanted as he was with the courses, prevalent atmosphere, and academic discipline, to quit his art academy education after only 2 years, though he came to somewhat regret the decision later in life. I mean, if they're not paying you, they're not paying you. That's the long and short of it. I would quit too if they were paying me only pennies to make artwork. But I can understand regretting it too, because it's like there's so much you could possibly learn, even though arguably he looked like he was doing pretty fine as far as art goes. Alright. Shortly before he entered military service, Giraud visited his idol at his home for the first time with Misery and Mallet, followed by a few visits on his own to see the master at work himself. In 1961, returning from military service and his stint on 5-5 Forces Françaises, Giraud, not wanting to return to Flores, as he felt that he had to do something else if he wanted to evolve, became an apprentice of Gigi on his invitation after he saw that Giraud had made artistic progress during his stay at the 5-5 Forces Françaises. Gigi was then one of the leading comic artists in Europe and known for his gracious tendency to voluntarily act as mentor for young aspiring comic artists, of whom Giraud was but one, going so far as opening up his family home in Champrosay for days on end for these youngsters, which again included Giraud. Well, that's nice of him. I'm also noticing that the Wikipedia article written here is a lot more detailed and a lot more has a lot more meat to it than other Wikipedia articles. So this must have been written by one of the more well-researched fanboys. Alright. In this, Gigi resembled Belgian comics grandmaster Herg, but unlike Gigi, Herg only did so on a purely self-serving commercial basis. Now, okay, we're gonna skip over that. Giraud created several short stories, illustrated for Bonk's Boy. First comic work after military service and his penultimate one before embarking on Blueberry. Alright, in this period, Gigi used his apprentice for inks on an outing of his Western series Jerry Spring, after whom Giraud had, unsurprisingly, modeled his Art Holwell character previously, The Road to Coronado, which Giraud inked. Actually, Gigi had intended his promising pupil for the entirety of the story art, but the still inexperienced Giraud, who was used to working under the relaxed conditions at Floros, found himself overwhelmed by the strict time schedule that production for a periodical demanded. Conceding that he had been a bit too cocky and ambitious, Giraud stated, "I started the story all by myself, but after a week I had only finished half a plate, and aside from being soaked with my sweat, it was a complete disaster." The hardest lesson that we all must learn and endure: deadlines. I had only... So Joseph went on to do the penciling, whereas I did the inks. Even though Giraud did lose touch with his mentor eventually, he never forgot what his master had provided him with, both aesthetically and professionally. The fatherless Giraud gratefully stated in later life, "It was as if he had asked me, 'Do you want me to be your father?' And if by a miracle I was provided with one, a comic artist, no less." Well, that's cute. Alright, how long is the career page? Because I don't want to spend too much time. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, we'll stop at the important parts, because my god, the fanboys went overboard with this Wikipedia page. We are not going to be able to get all of this done in the stream if we want to get to the actual interviews. So how about we stop at the heavy metal section and a little bit on the Marvel Comics section before we move on. But oh my goodness, I don't think I've ever seen a Wikipedia article this long before. It's like a full-on biography for this. Or as you compare it to like Bob Kane and Rob Liefeld, where it's like the intern wrote it. I need some hibiscus in my life right now. Yes. Alright. Metal Ronde, and I am going to be saying heavy metal for this section because I am so sick of these frickin' French names. Alright. Later that year, after Dune was permanently cancelled with him definitively returning to France, Giraud became one of the founding members of the comics art group and publishing house Les Humanoids Associates. Oh, Humanoids! Yeah, I know that one. Together with fellow comic artist Jean-Pierre Diont, Philippe Doulet, likewise pilot colleagues, and outsider financial director Bernard Farkas. In intimidation of the example set by L'École des Savants founding editors, it was therefore, as such, also an indirect result of the revolt these artists had previously staged at Palot, and whose employ they had left for the undertaking. Together they started the monthly magazine Heavy Metal, or it meant Screaming Metal. Heavy Metal works better than Screaming Metal. In December 1974, and for which he had temporarily abandoned his Blueberry series. The translated version was known in English-speaking world as Heavy Metal and started its release in April 1977, actually introducing Giraud's work to North American readership. Yeah, I think a lot of Americans would know Giraud's work more from his stuff in Heavy Metal than anything he's done for Marvel. I mean, I have read the Silver Surfer miniseries that he did. I have it on my bookshelf right now, actually. And the art is really good in there. The writing is okay, a bit ham-fisted, but okay. But I know way more people who know Moebius from his heavy metal stuff, and especially the stuff that his that makes an appearance in the heavy metal movie, than anything he's ever done for Marvel. Moebius' famous serial The Airtight Garage and his groundbreaking Arzak both began in heavy metal. Unlike Harakiri and Les Echos des Savants, though, whose appeal has always remained somewhat limited to the socially engaged satire and underground comic scene, it was heavy metal in particular that revolutionized the world of Franco-Belgian comics, whereas its American cousin left an indelible impression on a generation of not only American comic artists, but on filmmakers as well, as evidenced below. All right. I'm going to skip until we get to what Giraud actually did. Okay. Okay. So this is going to start with Arzak. Okay. A wordless 1974 to 1975 comic executed directly in color and created as a conscious attempt to breathe new life into the comic genre, which at the time was dominated by American superhero comics in the United States and by the traditional adolescent-oriented comics in Europe. It tracks the journey of the title character flying on the back of his pterodactyl through a fantastic world mixing medieval fantasy with futurism. Unlike most science fiction comics, it is, save for the artfully executed story titles, entirely devoid of captions, speech balloons, and written sound effects. I have seen people attempt to do those kind of comics before, but I think those kind of silent comics only really work well if it's like super good art. That sounds snobby to say, but I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's really hard to explain, but I feel like with Moebius' style, it works a lot better than it would for, say, the Johnny the Homicidal Maniac style, you know? Let's see. It has been argued that the wordlessness provides the strip with a sense of timelessness, setting up Arzak's journey as a quest for eternal universal truths. In the short stories, L'Homme is Man Good, issue 10, after its first publication, issues 744, 1974, which however woke Giraud up to the unbearable realization that he was enriching the publisher with his Moebius work, therefore expediting his departure. Alright. I think that's more trying to listing off the short stories he did. His series, The Airtight Garage, started its magazine run in issue 6, 1976, is particularly notable for its non-linear plot, where movement and temporarily can be traced in multiple directions, depending on the reader's own interpretation, even within a single page or picture. Why don't you just say page or picture? The series tells of Major Gerbert, who is constructing his own multi-level universe on an asteroid named Fleur from the Bonfaux universe incidentally, and the first known instance of the artist's attempt of tying all his Moebius creations into one coherent airtight garage universe. Oh, he tried to make his own multiverse, where he encounters a wealth of fantastic characters, including Michael Moorcock's creation, Jerry Cornelius? Michael Moorcock is involved with this too? Okay. This is interesting. Which one is Jerry Cornelius? I think he's one of the Eternal Champions. Urban Adventure. Wait, is this the character who bangs his sister I think I remember that from a stream from a few months back. Okay, I need to blank that out. Okay. Mark the publication of the 54-page Eyes of the Cat. The dark, disturbing, and surreal tale dealt with a blind boy in a nondescript empty cityscape who has his pet Eagle Scout for eyes, which it finds by taking these from a street cat and offering them to his awaiting companion who, while grateful, expresses his preference for the eyes of a child. Story premise originated from a brainstorming session Giraud had with his fellows of the a.k.a. Panique, a group concentrated on chaos and surrealist performance art as a response to surrealism becoming mainstream. Giraud worked. Okay, we're done with Giraud. Okay, in the magazine issue 58 of 1980, Giraud started his famous L'Incal series with his third collaboration with Jodorowsky. However, by this time, Giraud felt that his breakout success as Moebius had come at a cost. He had left Paulette to escape the pressure and stifling conditions he was forced to work under, seeking complete creative freedom, but now it was increasingly becoming as stifling as it had been before with Blueberry. As he conceded in 1982, adding philosophically, the more you free yourself, the more powerless you become. How deeply ingrained this sentiment was evidenced in a short interview with Heavy Metal issue 82 later that year, where an overworked Giraud stated, "I will finish the Blueberry series. I will finish the John DeFool Inkle series then I'm done. Then I will quit comics." He sounds so frustrated. Oh, but then you didn't quit comics, did you, Giraud? At the time, he had just finished working as storyboard and production design artist on the movie Tron. Okay, so, oh my god, there's just way too much stuff in this article. Okay. Marvel Comics. Here we go. We'll go over the Marvel Comics real quick, then we'll get to an interview. All right. There were thousands of professionals who knew my work. That has always amazed me every time I entered some graphics or animation studio at Marvel or even at George Lucas. Mentioning the name Jean Giraud did not cause any of the present pencilers, colorists, or storyboard artists to even bat an eye. Yet whenever I introduced myself as Moebius, all of them jumped up to shake my hand. It was incredible. That's kind of funny. You're known more for your pen name than for your actual name. But then again, Jack Kirby is known more as Kirby than his original last name. Same with Bob Kane, so, alright. After having arrived in California, Giraud's wife, Claudine, set up Giraud's third publishing house, Star Watcher Graphics, in 1985. Essentially the U.S. branch of GA, with the same goal, resulting in the release of, among others, the extremely limited art portfolio La Cité des Fous, a collaborative art project of Giraud with Jeff Darrow. However, due to their unfamiliarity with the American publishing world, the company did not do well. And in an effort to remedy the situation, Claudine hired the French-American editor couple Jean-Marc and Randy L'Officier, whom she had met at the summer 1985 San Diego Comic-Con, as translators and editors-in-chief for Star Watcher, also becoming shareholders in the company. Already veterans of the U.S. publishing world and Moebius fans, it was the L'Officier couple that managed to convince editor-in-chief Archie Goodwin of Marvel Comics to publish most of Moebius's hitherto produced works on a wider scale in the US, in contrast with the heavy metal niche market releases by HM Communications in the late 70s. In graphic novel format trade editions, under its Epic imprint from 1987 to 1994. These incidentally included 3 of Moebius's later day art books, as well as the majority of his Blueberry Western comic. So I wonder if Marvel is able to reprint that. Because wouldn't they have some stake in it? Or is his stuff no longer a part of Marvel and Giraud owned the copyright and the estate would be ultra pissed if Marvel did do that? Alright. It was for the Marvel Epic publication effort that it was decided to dispense with the Giraud Moebius dichotomy, until then strictly adhered to by the artist, as both the artist's given name and his Blueberry creation were all but unknown in the English-speaking world. This was contrary to his reputation as Moebius, already acquired in the heavy metal days, and from then on used for all his work in the English-speaking world and Japan, though the dichotomy remained elsewhere, including native France. A 2-issue Silver Surfer miniseries, later collected as Silver Surfer Parable, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Giraud as Moebius, was published through Marvel's Epic Comics imprint in 1988 and 1989. According to Giraud, this was his first time working under the Marvel method instead of from a full script, and he admitted to being baffled by the fact that he already had a complete story synopsis on his desk only 2 days after he had met Stan Lee for the first time, having discussed what Giraud had assumed was a mere proposition over lunch. Stan Lee did not waste any time to tie him down, did he? Hey, he saw a business opportunity and he jumped on it before anybody could back out, so... This miniseries won the Eisner Award for Best Finite Limited Series in 1989. Moebius's version was discussed in a 1995 submarine thriller, Crimson Tide, by 2 sailors, pitting his version against those of Jack Kirby, with the main character played by Denzel Washington. Why are all of this stuff packed into the article? Can we please just focus on Moebius? Alright. Becoming aware of the reference, Giraud later told around 2005 by the movie's director, Tony Scott, that it was he who had written in the dialogue as an homage to the artist on behalf of his brother, Ridley, a Moebius admirer and not uncredited script doctor Quentin Tarantino, known for infusing his works with pop culture references, as he was previously led to believe. And amused, Giraud quipped, It's better than a big stature because, in a way, I cannot dream of anything better to be immortal than being in a movie about submarines." Okie dokie. Alright, so did a little bit more in Marvel. Trading card company Comic Image released 8 Moebius collector cards in 1993. Interesting. Alright. Although Giraud had taken up residence in California for 5 years, holding a temporary residence visa, he maintained a transient lifestyle, as his work had him frequently traveling to Belgium and native France, as well as Japan for extended periods of time. His stay in the United States was an inspiration for his aptly made in LA art book, and much of his art he had produced in this period of time, including his superhero art, was reproduced in this and the follow-up art book Fusions. Okay. So, I'm going to stop the reading of the Wikipedia page there because holy crap, whoever wrote this article really, really, really wanted you to know all the little details about Giraud. Oh my goodness. So, I'm gonna stop and we're going to react to an interview or another video. I don't think this is an interview, but we shall see.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Shapes on a Page. Today, we'll be looking at Jean Giraud, better known as Moebius.
Did she just pronounce it as Moebius?
Although there are many interesting facets to Moebius's art, today we're going to cover the one aspect that makes it truly special, its lack of boundaries. In the comic book medium, you can express anything the mind can visually conceive. Of course, that's true with movies too, except many of the most imaginative movie moments can only be realized with a big-budget special effects team, stunt people, and CGI studios. Ideally, the comic book should be...
I also love his lettering. I think he does all his own lettering, and I just love how he does it. Like big bold for the shouts and yoo-hoo! It's unique. It's very unique.
Showing the same vast range of genres and themes that we see in film or literature. This is something that we do see more commonly in manga, where there is a greater variety of genres for a great variety of audiences. But comics haven't really made the same type of cross-genre splash in the Western world.
Well, they used to. I mean, comic books lost a lot of their genres from the CCA, and ever since the CCA got disbanded, a lot of those older genres started coming back, where we got our horror comics back, and more of the fantasy and some crime thrillers back, though romance is still struggling a little bit. We do have, like, independently published romance books that sometimes get noticed, but most of the romances are in webcomic books. But no, comics used to be very diverse, and then superheroes kind of took over. And that's had been a very, very contentious point for some comic book writers and some comic book fans, because quite a few comic book writers, most notably Warren Ellis and Garth Ennis, have stated that they don't necessarily hate superheroes, but they're very frustrated that superheroes have just taken over the medium of comic books, because Garth Ennis in particular is a big fan of war comics, and for those old-style war comics to be shoved into the background while the spandex heroes took over really frustrated him. Though he does really like Superman, apparently, which is ironic considering he created Homelander.
We really seem to be fixated on superhero stories in particular, but that's a topic for another day. Moebius was an artist who really took genre to the next level.
Why is she pronouncing it Moebius?
By crafting worlds and stories that were entirely in a universe of their own. Moebius didn't begin as Moebius, though. He originally used his given name, Jean Giraud, and fleshed out his beautiful art style and storytelling with his work on the Western, Blueberry. Giraud used the Moebius pseudonym only when drawing science fiction. Perhaps he felt the need to become someone else in order for his art to go somewhere vastly different.
Did she do research? I mean, he stated very much that it was because of his parents' divorce that he has bitter feelings towards his name.
As Moebius, he would tell stories that take our minds to a different place, beginning with something foreign outside of human experience, and then smashing it with something oddly familiar. This causes us as readers to step outside our minds and see ideas and concepts that weren't there before. This contrast of déjà vu and jamais vu results in a strangely euphoric catharsis. Moebius's art itself is characterized by very thin line work, which is toned inside with tiny dots, dashes, and curved lines.
I think my boyfriend would absolutely love this artwork. Because he also enjoys heavy metal, the movie. We were talking about this the other day. We were looking at the Brian Boland cover for The Killing Joke, and he mentioned that he really liked the detailing lines on the Joker's glove especially. So I think my boyfriend would absolutely love this art style.
If it hadn't been consistent throughout everything he drew, his style may have appeared strange. As it happens, however...
I mean, it is strange, but we love it because it is strange. I mean, science fiction and fantasy are the best times to get strange with your art designs.
He wove it into every detail of his art. Moebius also had a very cinematic art style. His comic book pages almost seemed like they were intended to be used as storyboards for a film. He would create vast and detailed establishing panels with cityscapes or craggy desert mountains. This allows his worlds to be fully realized and feel very lived in. His characters are always very animated, and their actions are clearly represented in what they are doing. As his stories proceed, his characters usually build to actions of extreme intensity, which is shown in vividly expressive drawing. His style is minimalistic and yet deeply detailed at the same
I don't think you know what minimalism means, babe.
time. This is what allowed him to have so much range with his subject matter. One can't help but get the feeling that Moebius drew very quickly in an intense stream of consciousness. It's no surprise that Moebius's art helped inspire such revolutionary films such as Ridley Scott's Alien and Blade Runner.
I mean, he did the storyboards for... It was Alien, yeah? I know I sound stupid just by going back to check the films, but he didn't inspire it. He did the storyboards. Well, not Blade Runner, but with Alien, yeah, he did the... I'm getting really weirded out by this video. It's like, it's all on the Wikipedia page. The Wikipedia page has more information than needed, so go check out the Wikipedia page. Like, weirdly enough, the Wikipedia, this time around, basically functions as a bibliography of literally everything.
Whether you're a writer, artist, or both, get your hands on one of Moebius's books for some inspiration. You owe it to yourself to check out his work.
Like, again, why is she pronouncing his name Moebius? Or does she think it's Moebius? It's Mo as in Mo. Moebius. Or what? There's an interview with him over here, so maybe he can pronounce it for us. All right, which one should we do first? Let's do the 7-minute one first. Let's hear him pronounce his pen name so we can pass judgment accordingly.
I am Jean Giraud, alias Moebius, and I work in comics.
You said that really quickly.
I am Jean Giraud, alias Moebius, and I work in comics since...
So it is Moebius. So why was that chick calling him Moebius? That is so weird. Like, okay, I'm convinced that she might have just done a very, very, very cursory glance at his Wikipedia page.
40 years now. I started with stories was connected to United States. Especially my first work was about the West, a Western story called Blueberry. And I did 25 books about that saga. And meanwhile, I started in 70s to do science fiction as Moebius. took that name and I was 21. It was a joke, and I thought it was for 6 months or 2 weeks. And now many people call me Moebius. They don't know my real name. So it's done. I don't know why I did that, but what I know, it's a nice name. I like it, and it's full of strange sounds and meanings I discovered by the years. And I think I had a very good intuition when I took it. And I did many books, and I worked a lot here for heavy metal. I worked for movies, Tron, Alien, Abyss. Now I'm preparing to do more things, more movies, more comics. It's my life. I'm into film since a long time, but now I'm into film in a better level. It's growing up a little bit. Not in quantity, but in quality. I write stories, I write scenarios, and the scenarios are interesting now, and they have the possibility to make movie from those stories. So we have contact with producer, directors. And also about Blueberry, there are many possibilities now to do movie here in Hollywood. So we are into discussions and contract and all that stuff. My ideas in movies are closer than the Hollywood system, than the European system, because I never tried to make movies in Europe or nowhere. I just dreamed. But my dreams are much closer than the American cinema, than the European cinema. Like, for example, Luc Besson or Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Now there are a new generation in director in France. They try to do that kind of movies, with action and more ideas, science fiction, fantastic. And it's a different generation.
European movies are very different from American movies, and when you spend your life growing up on American movies, you can't quite even view your own style in the same way in a European movie as in an American one. I kind of feel that way when it comes to American movies versus anime, because I do like both, and I find that sometimes my writing style reflects more of a manga than it does of like regular American comics or American movies. I also think more in dreams and scenarios rather than in like hard plots, and I'm trying to work on that.
And I was a little bit that way, but I never tried to be involved really in movies, because I had the comics to do. But because I met a lot of directors, I work into movies, I had step by step, I went to the business. But sure that the difference between movies and here and Europe is big, but the difference between the comics too is big. But in comics too, what I do is not completely European, it's more international. I have a lot of influence here in America, the underground, but also the classic artists in the 50s, like Milton Caniff or Alex Raymond, the old generation. But also the underground, Corbin, or I was really influenced by the American art, not only in comics, but in movies, in music. I was a fan of jazz, I was a fan of Western musicals and action movies. So my culture is half European and half American. Prototype Garage. I did that in a very special mood and situation. It was just after the creation of that magazine Heavy Metal in France, Metal Hurlant, and I wanted to give every month something.
Someone's kids are getting home. I think that's the lower neighbor's kids are getting home.
Thing on a small page or 2 or 3, but something. The minimum was 1 page. And I did that for maybe 3 or 4 years. And I didn't have any story. I just wanted to give the pages, the beginning of the project. But I saw, in those strange conditions, I saw a story coming step by step, you know. And at the end, the last 20 pages, it was time to finish. And I took all the story and I tried to make a hand. And I did it, you know. It was very, very magic.
He's going by the philosophy of, I wanted to do it, so I did it. Which is a very based way of looking at creation. I did it because I wanted to. End of discussion.
And now, when I see that story, I see it's kind of diary for 4 years, and each page is different than the page before and the page after, and it's a very strange story. And I don't think it's possible to recreate that. I tried to recreate that, but it was impossible. The conditions are finished. It doesn't come back, never. I don't think so. So for me, it's a kind of strange and unique performance I did. In everything I do, there are a moment or a little space in a painting or 2 or 3 pages in a book I don't like. Because when I do a book, it's generally between 3 and 10 months work. It's difficult
I bet. With all that detail, I bet.
to stay in the top every day for 6 months, you know. There are always a week where you you are depressed or something comes, you don't like it, but it's because it's commercial, you have to go on, and you let the bad thing goes, and it stays forever after, you know. So when I open a book, I can see kind of scanning of my psychic life in 6 months, with the high levels and the low levels.
Okay, that's a nice little short interview there. Let's see. I found this other article by this guy named Paul Gravett. This article was done in 2011, I believe. It's a part 2. So I couldn't find part 1 before the stream. I'll see if I can dig it up after the stream. But let's take a look at this. Moebius and Giraud leading a double life, part 2. Alright. Oh no! Why do I always start yawning during my streams? Okay. One of my highlights of 2010 was being whisked over by Art Review to interview Moebius, a.k.a. Jean Giraud, at Transform, his wonderful one-man retrospective exhibit at the Foundation Carrier in Paris. I had met the great man before a few times, including having dinner with him at one of the excellent UK comic art conventions organized in the 80s in London by Frank Blauwright and Hassan Youssef. Hassan Youssef? Why does that name sound familiar? Anyway, looking good in a light suit and t-shirt, Moebius was relaxed, responsive, reflective, enjoying speaking in English with me, and our hour together was a delight. In keeping with his exhibition's title and theme, Moebius was about to transform to change and replace the works on display. He had also been making a new drawing every day for the show. Now a man of 72 with some health concerns, Moebius' spirit still shines bright both in person and in his works. Two of France's geniuses in contemporary comics, Moebius and Jean Giraud, are one man. Like his enigmatic namesake, the Moebius strip of a twisted loop of paper discovered by the German mathematician in 1858, Moebius and Giraud form one continuous intertwined identity. Since 1963, Giraud made his name illustrating and later also writing some 30 albums about the rugged, rebellious U.S. cavalry officer, Lieutenant Blueberry, initially modeled on Jean-Paul Belmont, crafting one of the world's most vivid and humane westerns in any medium. Oh, that's right. Blueberry has that thing where he doesn't kill anymore, I think it is. I think he has that rule with himself that he doesn't kill because he started off as a bastard and then became a better person through his adventures. All right. That same year, 1963, Giraud adopted his punning Moebius nom de plume to sign solo humor strips for Harakiri magazine. It would not be until post-May 1968, however, amid the heady French Revolution in adult auteur comics, that his Moebius side would emerge fully formed as a visionary universe builder, infusing science fiction with an intense reality and spirituality. Now 72 and being feted with an in-depth retrospective at the Foundation Center, Paris, he has come a long way since he failed to qualify at art school for the illustration department and was relegated to designing wallpaper. Along the way, Mexico has provided a recurrent catalyst in his personal and artistic growth. This began in 1956 when, as a student, Jean was already selling enough comics to magazines to travel there for his summer break to reconnect with his recently remarried mother. I first saw the desert on a Greyhound bus trip, and that vision burned my brain forever. I met Mexico, a magical country, well, it depends on who you ask, and was adopted as the mascot by a bunch of radical anti-American artists, writers, poets, journalists living in the bohemian life. They were the continuation of a culture of revolution in murals and the school of Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo. I learned that to be an artist is to connect your story to a bigger story, to the history of humanity. They initiated me into the practice of art, modern jazz, playing chess, and to marijuana, of course. Not for fun, but to use as a tool for creation. Yeah, sure. Different from the approach to drugs in the 60s. I did not draw, but I spent my days walking, discussing, observing, absorbing. I stayed longer and missed my third year of school, but I thought I was learning something more important. It completely transformed me. I do agree that a lot of creating art is just absorbing what's around you, and it's not just honing your craft. I'm not saying that that isn't important, but it's like if you just focus on the technical side and ignore the personal side, then it kind of falls a little flat. Alright, so she pursued comics, becoming an assistant and eventually collaborator on the cowboy series Jerry Spring. From his mentor, Giraud acquired a fulsome, supple brush technique and a passion for realism and authenticity, which hugely enhanced his own Western project Blueberry. Here he unveiled a distinct, convincing American West of multicolored vistas and uncanny rock formations. Giraud's return to Mexico in 1965 marked another revelatory stage. Blah. I tried to contact those artists, but they had disappeared. As for my mother, I couldn't find her house. I had nightmares about it for years. I was always in a big city trying to find a house and never finding it. For 6 months, I learned how to be alone with my thinking, trying to build an identity for my personal use, not for communication in society. Many people are never alone in their life. I recommended loneliness as a theme for study. That sounds like the plot for like an heavily existential movie or for like a horror film. Meditation, magic mushrooms, fasting all brought fresh insights and contributed to an extraordinary eruption of Moebius in the early 70s. Well, magic mushrooms will definitely do that to you. This culminated in his co-creation of the magazine Heavy Metal in 1975, home to the haunting wordless voyages of Arzak. Astride his pterodactyl, why did I say pterodactyl? Pterodactyl, and the totally improvised, interdimensional, airtight garage saga. It's not much longer now, I don't think. Yeah, those are just images. Mexico would come to him in Paris that year in the form of the Chilean-born writer-director Alejandro Jodorowsky. He didn't find his old buddies, but he did bring back a souvenir in the form of a wacko film director. To co-founder of the absurdist Panic Moment. I met him by pure accident. He was looking out for me for his Dune movie, and I knew my work. I had seen his movie Holy Mountain 6 months before and was knocked out because it gave me another way of perceiving the world. Jodorowsky had been a showman, very much on the surface, but now he was going deeper inside, working especially in tarot. He gave me direct proof that it was possible to open the door inside. That sounds trippy. Although the Dune project never happened, Jodorowsky, 9 years older than Moebius, became another vital mentor and creative partner, scripting their epic science fiction graphic novel, The Inkle. Dune also introduced Moebius to the movie business, where he has contributed ever since, from Alien and Tron to The Abyss and The Fifth Element. Los Angeles is also part of Mexico, the WASP side. I love LA. I like driving to be stuck on the freeway in the middle of beautiful cars. As for getting movie proposals of his own made, to date, Moebius has had less success. I am not a producer or director. I only draw. Of course, I love the cinema. I have been fed by film since the beginning. My collaborations with movies had given me more than all my books. It's a big industry. Comics are a bit on the side. He was heading off again shortly to Hollywood with the dream of realizing a feature based on his own work, demonstrated by a new 8-minute pilot for a 3D computer-animated version of his marooned space travelers, Stel and Anton. He has also dusted off his on-film script for a Japanese proposal to animate Arzak and turn it into the first of a trilogy of oversized albums reviving his Mute Voyager, now speaking and embroiled in a racist society analogous to the white man's suppression of Native Americans. Moebius's last return trip to the desert arrived as the self-published cycle Inside Moebius, partly a surreal Pirandello-like metafiction about his 6 characters wandering the wasteland in search of their author, and partly a therapeutic inner exploration, as shown in the 2-page extract below. It came after I had some health problems and took medicine which made a hole in my stomach. I was on the bus and I had to get out. I threw up some black blood and fainted. I woke up in a hospital with all these tubes in me. Inside Moebius became an allegory, a way to be completely free, to play with different versions of me, and to be funny. These 6 volumes brim over with unfettered, free-flowing invention. He even responded to 9/11 by introducing Osama bin Laden into the cast. Okay, dude. Since the beginning, my desire is to be boundless, without limits, while still being a good seller for my publishers. There's always a tension there, but we can make choices on paper. The virginity of a simple sheet of paper is the desert. All right. Here we got some Moebius art. I'm guessing these are the inside Moebius illustrations. Okay, so this post was made in 2011. Exotics. So what is this? Okay, so these are just showcasing the works. All right. Okay, so now let's go to this Artists in the World of Comics, Moebius, 1991. Is this going to be in French? Do I need to put on the...
Moebius.
Oh, thank God it's English.
He is in the habit of taking long journeys through his mind. He puts on his explorer's outfit and goes as deep as he can inside himself. When he reaches a quiet and picturesque spot, he starts fishing with his pencil. He casts his stroke through the river of his dreams, but always catches something. Proof that other worlds exist elsewhere can be found in Moebius's drawings.
Like all children, I used to draw for reasons relating to my own personal experience. Instead of giving up drawing, I kept on with it. This is what happens with most people who draw. All kids draw. All kids like to be a nuisance. All kids like to sing. Some stop, but all kids like ordering people about, and all children like to do what adults do. In the end, what we do when we're adults is to continue with aspects from our childhood, which are then perfected. We build bridges, aeroplanes, sing songs, or draw comic strips. I'm no exception. Instead of giving up drawing, I continued. Actually, I gave up everything else. I stopped singing, I stopped building bridges.
Il est certain que quand je faisais de la bande dessinée d'une façon plus classique,
When I used to draw comic strips in a classical way, in a more classical way than I do now,
que je pouvais mettre dans le dessin,
all the energy put into the drawings was used in trying to make my drawing look like something that had already been done in the comic style of the 50s,
de la bande dessinée,
when Joseph Giraud was a master of the art.
Giraud était un des maîtres.
Well, that's normal, like taking what you've seen in the past and building off of that. A lot of the Golden Age artists got their start by just tracing.
Et je cherchais pas à ressembler à la réalité, je cherchais à ressembler à ce style.
I didn't seek to imitate the reality. What I meant was to imitate the style. I wanted to do drawings like that.
Photographique, je transformais le document photographique en cette...
When I got hold of a photograph, I would transform it into something which resembled the classical style.
Puis quand j'ai commencé, par contre, quand j'ai commencé à prendre un peu plus d'assurance au niveau du dessin, j'ai commencé à intégrer...
Then, when I began to feel more at home in that type of drawing, I started to incorporate a kind of realism, to deal with a whole range of details, such as clothing, aspects which don't always correspond to the image of a hero as it was in the 50s.
Qui ne correspond pas toujours au code du héros de bande dessinée tel qu'on le faisait dans les années 50.
Blueberry did indeed undergo a period of physical decline, which is really very relative.
Effectivement, physique, c'est-à-dire en fait une dégradation toute relative parce que
In fact, this decline happened because I was more and more interested in discovering the realistic aspects.
j'étais de plus en plus intéressé par le...
That's an interesting theory. I don't think anybody would be mad at the realistic aspects, or unless he meant the realistic situations that Blueberry would end up in. In that case, I guess, because the realism of the Wild West and cowboys is nowhere near as idealized as it was in the John Wayne films. Well, even in the John Wayne films, they got pretty nasty, but yeah.
Anyone who's really gone into the Blueberry stories, who's got into the adventures which happened to Blueberry, will understand that he can't really keep up his clean, well-combed, clean-shaven appearance with the neatly pressed clothes. It just isn't possible. On the one hand, I try to follow the logical development of the story, and at the same time, Blueberry's character. Somebody who doesn't care too much about his appearance. He goes from a state of unawareness, which he finds himself in, a social structure which he sticks to, because although he may seem to protest inwardly, he continues to be passive. And from that, he turns to disobedience and defiance, questioning everything until he reaches a state of liberation. He does well in protesting, in being obstinate, because in the end, he's declared innocent. He recovers his integrity, and he can set off towards freedom. He's forever starting things. He goes from one stage to another. He goes through all the stages. That's wonderful.
Il y a toutes les étapes, voilà, c'est ça, donc c'est formidable.
I do like those characters where it's like they have their big arc and then they go on. They have their big character defining arc, and then the rest of their adventures is like different little mini arcs where it just fine details what they've went through, and not like one big character change after another big character change after another big character change. You know, just maybe a simple story where it can iron out some aspects of their character that had not been addressed earlier. this video wasn't so grainy.
When I became Moebius, I discovered I could do the same, but instead of resembling any existing style, I could make it look like something inside me and still unknown. It wasn't a well-known style, it was a style yet to be discovered. It was often an amalgamation of aspects which had been conjectured to differing degrees in classical or modern art, or in an intermediate art, I don't know, art which is not art, either advertising, comic strips, original amalgamations.
I mean, some advertising I would classify as art, like especially those old Art Nouveau advertising posters from the, I think it's like the late 1800s. I would classify those as art because some of those just look absolutely fantastic.
Ces choses-là, enfin des amalgames inédits.
Comic strips actually express more than they seem to at first sight.
I would agree.
They're very real in the sense that drawing is a very immediate, very direct art, which puts very few veils between the ego and its expression.
Huh? I think what he means is you can depict exactly what you see in your head in your art.
Qui construit peu de voile entre le moi et l'expression de ce moi. Même si on cherche à coder,
Even if you try to codify, even if you try to imitate any given style, such as the classical style, it's always some sort of graphology of writing.
des graphologues pour décoder.
There are always graphologists to decodify those things and to see through the drawing, through revelations of fear, of wrath, of anguish, of the artist's dreams. I believe that in the same way, each reader, albeit unwittingly, is a graphologist. It's very exciting for an artist to discover those natural, pure, spontaneous aspects which he may possess. But it's also a trap. From the moment you start drawing, you're revealing your inner self. But then again, this doesn't only happen with drawing. I think it happens in any other medium of expression.
I would agree with that too. Sometimes when you're making art, you might accidentally reveal something inside you that you didn't even know was there. I've noticed that a lot with especially my free verse poetry, where I'd write a poem, step back and look at it, and it's like, where the hell did that come from? Or sometimes I'll just write a poem, it's like, oh, this is pretty neat, and then I'll look back on it later and it's like, I think my brain was trying to tell me something. Like, your subconscious will inevitably seep through to your art. That it's inevitable. Like, you can't escape it.
Whether it's music or literature.
Se dépouiller d'une façon impudique.
There are very few authors who dare to reveal themselves in a thoroughly shameless way. Mind you, I understand it. But on the other hand, we must consider that the comic strip is a medium of expression which covers a whole range of possibilities, from the most commercial to the most virulent personal expression. This is a personal manifesto, an important declaration of intentions. It's a program. Behind the laughter, through entertainment, through amusement, and through stimulation, there's always, in a more serious manner, a recognition of creativity, something relating to life itself.
prise de position par rapport à...
Somehow I decided, or rather I deviated, so that I moved away from the rest.
Soit je décidais, soit je pressentais que je déviais.
I don't know if it's because they're translating it from French, but I feel like some of his sentences are kind of confusing to understand at first. Maybe it's because I don't know. I don't think it's because he's not expressing himself. I think it's just the language barrier makes it a little difficult to kind of figure out what exactly he's talking about. Doesn't help that I'm also pretty tired.
C'était bien à l'époque,
At that time, I wasn't looking to say anything. I only wanted to live my life doing comic strips.
simplement à exister, à être en train de faire de la bande dessinée. Le plaisir me suffisait.
The pleasure of it all was enough. But unfortunately, things get spoilt, and one gets caught up in a common disease, a desire to communicate one's own ideas.
En lisant les bouquins et en...
If the ideas are there, of course, reading books, living through personal experiences, and so on.
Le problème se pose, comment communiquer
You want to communicate your feelings, but then you have the problem of how to communicate so as to keep the feelings alive.
On avance librement, disons que... bon,
When one has nothing to say, when one advances freely, I don't know if it's easy, but let's say that I have experienced this way of being alive.
cette façon
This can be seen in Arzach, and in the garage, and in other improvised stories.
dans le garage et même dans plein d'histoires que j'ai faites comme ça à l'improvisation.
I gained a certain amount of experience in creating stories this way.
Acquis une certaine expérience dans la façon de donner la vie à une histoire de cette
Just rummage through your brain cells and find an idea that's been rattling around for God knows how long and see what you can make of it.
façon-là.
The revivalist explosion in the comic strip was due to some sort of feedback between the events of May 1968, inasmuch as they took place historically, and our present situation.
Telles qui se sont déroulées historiquement et notre situation. Mais on peut dire également
It can also be said that the events of May 1968 were the expression of what we were. They were also provoked by us. Both things are once again inextricably connected.
ça correspond à
This corresponds to me personally and my position, to the extent that, as I said a moment ago, I was Moebius, thanks to my state of mind, which was then being born, which came straight out of me, to live or to relive.
vivre ou revivre. J'étais en prise directe avec
I was directly connected to the state of mind which led to May 1968.
non pas
It wasn't, let's create a new type of society, but rather, let's open up the house so that a new model may be found and expressed.
être capté et être exprimé.
Hold on. Established his own style after both editorial control and censorship laws were loosened in the way of the May 1968 social upheaval in France, the former in no small part due to the revolt key comic artists. Giraud, chief among them, states a short time hereafter in editorial offices of Drogue, the publisher of Palot, demanding and ultimately receiving more creative freedom from editor-in-chief René Goscinny. So, hold on. May 68 was a period of widespread protests, strikes, and civil unrest in France that, well, civil unrest in France happens every other month, so became one of the most significant social uprising in modern European history, especially sparked by student demonstrations against university conditions and government. That's not very specific, but okay.
I saw the birth of a newspaper, and I saw it develop. It was alive. First it was a baby, then a child, then a youth, an adult, and later an old man, and then a dying man, and finally a fond memory. I saw a whole lifespan. Perhaps newspapers are designed to survive for different periods. There are those which are destined to live for a century or two, and others which have a complete and harmonious life, but exist for no more than 10 years. Why not?
He feels pretty chill about that. Okay.
The idea behind the garage was to establish some sort of relationship with the reader through an enigmatic attitude, through mystery. And also, of course, through humor, the irreverent use of all the known systems in the comic strip. There's a system of narrative, there's also the graphic system, and so on. Using this, amalgamating it all, playing with it like a slightly mad child, and then suddenly letting it drop in order to obtain strange figures. There was a distinct emotion, which we were fully conscious of.
Oh no. Damn it. Hold on. Stream suspended for policy violations. Oh dear. Okay. Let's see what's going on here. Come on. All right, what's going on? Okay.